Hello, welcome to the Dixie Belle YouTube channel. My name is Connie from Faff Designs and I'm one of your Dixie Belle brand ambassadors. In the video today, I'm going to show you how to take a piece of brown, dull, unwanted furniture and turn it into something that's a little bit more up to date. So with vintage furniture, there's usually always something that crops up. This one was no exception to that rule, and you can see from the underneath of the lid there's some damage to the veneer. So I took the blanket box lid off completely and I just assessed the damage, or how sort of severe the veneer damage was on the lid top. And I just sort of shoved a scraper and took off the loose stuff, and it was pretty bad. So I decided to take all the veneer off the underneath of the lid. I did a detailed video on my own YouTube channel. If you want to go and have a look at that, you can find me at Faff Designs. So with the lid off, I then got to work cleaning the piece. In my spray bottle, there is a pre-mixed solution of Dixie Belle's White Lightning Cleaner along with water, and I just sprayed that all over the piece and used a microfiber cloth to give it a good scrub. I also did underneath, I did inside, and I also did the back. Once everywhere's had a really good scrub and it's nice and clean, just make sure you rinse off your piece to make sure there's no cleaning product residue left on the surface. I then used my electric sander and gave it a really good scuff sand all over. This is just going to break the finish on the existing finish, which is some kind of varnish. It's just going to give my paint a little bit of something to grip onto, and you don't have to strip it right back. You're just looking for that kind of hazy look, which indicates that you have broken the existing finish. And then for the details, I just used a folded up piece of sandpaper just to get in all of the nooks and crannies, because obviously the legs do have some details and there is some carved details on the front as well. And as I was cleaning and sanding, I noticed there were a couple of dings in the front there, so I just went ahead and filled those with Dixie mud. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and prime my piece. I'm going to use Dixie Belle's Boss in the colour grey, and I'm applying it with a synthetic brush. Now, if you've noticed, I have turned the piece upside down. I usually work on my pieces upside down first. That way you don't have to keep flipping it over and risk dinging the fresh paint. I'm just using the smallest round brush. It's a synthetic brush and it's a Dixie Belle brush, and that's just going to help me get in all those kind of carved pieces on the legs. Now, this piece is being refinished in Silk All-in-One Mineral Paint, which does have a built-in stain blocking primer built into the paint. However, from experience, these oak chests can be severely bad with bleed through. Bleed through is when tannins leak through into your paint, and it might give you a slight discoloration to your paint finish. So just as a precautionary measure, I'm going to prime this using one coat of Boss, and that way I know I'm covered for any bleed through issues that might arise in the future. I just know that it's almost like an insurance policy. So I am super sure that we're not going to encounter any bleed through later on. So moving on to the larger panels of the blanket box, I used a slightly bigger brush. I'm using the mini synthetic brush. That's just going to give me quicker coverage versus the small round brush that I was using for the legs earlier. Again, I'm just doing one coat of Boss just to give me a sort of insurance policy, if you like, and just making sure that I'm getting in all those details on the front. And Boss works absolutely fine with all of the paints in the Dixie Belle line, which is Terra, Silk Mineral Paint and Chalk Mineral Paint. Once the primer had been dry 24 hours, I then went over it with a Dixie Belle sanding sponge. They're equivalent to a 220 grit, and that is just going to knock any little pieces of texture that I've got out and give me a really smooth finish. And then we can go ahead and paint. So I'm using the colour Deep Sea from the Silk Mineral Paint range, and it's a beautiful deep navy blue. The trick is when you're doing carved details to use slightly less paint than you would ordinarily, and just make sure you've got sort of all the details without any drips or anything like that, and then smooth over afterwards. And the key to using silk paint and getting that really smooth finish is applying nice, even, smooth strokes. And you can also sand in between coats of silk mineral paint, so just make sure that your first coat of paint has completely dried. If you run your hand over and you can feel any sort of little tiny bits of texture, you can just run over those with, I'm using the same sanding sponge that I used when I sanded after the primer. And I'm just going to very, very lightly just run that sanding sponge over the surface. I'm not putting any pressure on the sanding sponge, and I'm just using my hand to run over the paint to make sure it's super smooth. Just make sure you wipe away any dust with a microfiber cloth that you may have on the surface of your piece before you apply your second coat, and then you can apply your second coat in exactly the same way as your first. Just try and keep your brush strokes super smooth and soft, and you can just see that that second coat is just going to give us that really nice full coverage and beautiful depth to the paintwork. So my blanket chest only needed 2 coats of Deep Sea. Sometimes you need a third coat. It just depends on the colour you're using and what you are painting. And the great thing about silk mineral paint, and the thing that I personally love about it, is that it doesn't need a top coat. It has a built-in top coat. It gives you a very light sort of sheen, equivalent to kind of like an eggshell finish. And it is a very durable paint. So I painted it, I left it to dry, I put the lid back on, and it was done. Once I popped the lid back on the blanket box, I also treated the interior with Big Mama's butter, because look at that wood grain, it's beautiful. I just kept the final shot super simple and chic. I think you'll agree this blue really suits this piece. If you'd like to purchase any of the Dixie Belle products that I've used in the video, be sure to head to the Dixie Belle website and check out your local Dixie Belle retailer. Thank you for watching as always. Make sure if you have any questions about the process, drop them in the comments below, and make sure you are subscribing to the Dixie Belle YouTube channel.